upheld the myth that it is unbeatable and invincible, with its supposedly powerful military and its impenetrable Iron Dome. And this is a necessary illusion, because one of Zionism's main arguments is that Israel must exist as the only safe place for Jews in the world. But for the past few years, the resistance from Gaza and the south of Lebanon, and now Iran, have proven how false that myth is. Maintaining this illusion is essential to the Zionist state, which is why they have a military censor that controls what information and what images can get out, and why most people aren't seeing how badly they're being hit. But the settlers are seeing it all. After the war on Gaza began, departures from the settler colony surged by 400% in that month alone, compared to October 2022.
Iran is now providing an effective challenge to the very existence of Israel. We'll see how many Israelis want to remain.
But safety isn't the only reason Israelis are leaving the colony. The truth is, the unraveling began long before October 7th. For years, Israeli generals, intelligence officials, and political leaders have warned that the greatest threat to Israel doesn't come from the outside. It comes from within. From the slow collapse of the one thing the project depends on most: Israeli society. Social cohesion, the sense that a society shares common identity and a common vision for the future, is generally one of the foundations of a stable country.
Every society is divided in one way or another. I mean, essentially, that is the human condition. But what we find in Israel is that the extent of the division is stark.
Almost a civil war, right, left, religious, others.
An estimated 300,000 citizens marching Saturday.
There is an inability of the Jewish society to find a common base for their idea of what a Jewish state means.
To understand this tension, we have to look at the groups that make up Israeli society. The largest group are the Haloni, the so-called secular Jews, making up 40 to 50% of the population. They dominate Israel's tech sector and form the backbone of the economy and the military. They're generally non-religious Zionists and see being Jewish as a cultural identity and Israel as a liberal democracy with Western values.
No democracy, no high-tech. Under this slogan, hundreds of those working in the Tel Avivian high-tech sector.
We're the ones supporting all of the taxes that are not paid by other groups in the Israeli society.
At the opposite end of the spectrum are the Haredi. They're the ultra-Orthodox and most conservative.
Only around half work official jobs, and though they contribute fewer taxes, they're often entitled to more state support because of their low income.
Since Israel's founding, military service has been mandatory for most Jews, but the Haredis were exempt if they were in full-time religious studies.
Focused on a long-standing grievance, the inequality between the ultra-Orthodox and other parts of Israeli society.
They don't have to endanger their lives for the security of this country, but it should be stopped.
Tens of thousands of ultra-Orthodox Jewish protesters streamed to Jerusalem on Thursday, demonstrating against efforts to conscript seminary students into Israel's armed forces.
Between these two groups are the religious Zionists. Unlike the Haredim, they are deeply committed to the state and strongly represented in the military. But their vision of Israel is not secular. They think that the land was given to Jews by divine right, and that Israel is a religious project. They have risen to power through people like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, and are at the forefront of settlement expansion.
These elected representatives of the religious far right took office at the beginning of 2023. Benjamin Netanyahu entered an alliance with them to come back as prime minister.
לעודד אותם ללכת מכאן, והורשתם את יושבי הארץ. זה שלנו מאז ולתמיד.
Tensions and violence in the occupied West Bank, already high, have been rising further.
Their rhetoric and policies made the carefully cultivated image as a liberal democracy increasingly difficult to buy. All these groups are not just culturally different, they live in different delusions of what the settler colony is. And this exploded in 2023.
For months, millions of progressive Israelis took to the streets to fight what they called a coup d'etat.
In early 2023, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu introduced sweeping judicial reforms that would weaken the Supreme Court.
צריך להבין שהמהפכה המשטרית הזאת נשענת במדינת ישראל על תנועה גזענית, פשיסטית, בן גביר, סמוטריץ', אנשים שרואים בעצמם עליונים מעצם זה שהם יהודים, עליונים על כל מי שהוא לא יהודי, ועליונים על כל מי שהוא לא מספיק יהודי או לא יהודי כמוהם.
For months, Israel looked like a society on the brink of internal rupture.
Now there are signs that more secular Israelis are considering leaving the country, with one recent poll suggesting 1 in 3 Israelis.
I will not raise my kids in a country which is not democratic.
In the long term, if the situation will be so bad, it's worsening every day, we will find a place to live outside Israel. We all have European passports.
Then October 7th, and with it, one of the most powerful forces that sustained settler colonies returned to the center: the fight for survival. It's important to note that despite all their differences, the overwhelming majority of Jews in Israel believe in the dispossession of Palestinians and the colonization of their land, regardless of what they identify as. Settler colonies are born through violence. It's the intrinsic DNA of this society, and it's the only thing that can restore unity between them when everything else starts falling apart. In many ways, the occupation has always functioned as the one unifying project of Israeli society. And the Gaza genocide took this to a whole other level. The violence unleashed by Israeli settlers defies description.
The war is not just with Hamas, the war with all the civilians.
Today is 10 times worse than yesterday, 100 times worse than the first day. Gaza is collapsing.
I can hear Hamas being pulverized, and it's the greatest sound I've ever heard in my life.
The images are burned into the world's memory. And throughout it all, the majority of the settlers not only participated, but they cheered it on.
We are looking for babies, but there is no babies left.
What babies? Say that again.
In doing so, Israel revealed its moral collapse to the entire world, isolating the colony more and more as a pariah on the global stage. But isolation has its own effect. The more the world recoiled, the more Israeli society retreated into a siege mentality, a belief that survival depended on unity against this hostile outside world. And that instinct pushed the settlers to band together, even as their society fractured from within. This is why war has always been so essential to Israel, because it's the only thing that can bring the Jewish settlers together. It's the artificial heartbeats required to keep the corpse alive.
This war is so highly popular in Israeli public opinion, or in Jewish Israeli public opinion. 93% of the Israelis support this war. In no democracy, there is such a figure in a survey about any kind of question. And this comes after 2.5 years of another war.
What we have is a collapse
a social collapse. It's also psychological collapse. It has to do with the fact that Israelis have lost connection with reality.
There is a trend here, and the trend is towards the collapse of Zionism.
And all of this is not just bad for the soul of a nation, it's also bad for business. The Israeli economy was already bad before the genocide in Gaza, and only got worse after, with tens of thousands of businesses going bankrupt, tourism stopping, Israel's credit score lowered, and foreign investments withdrawing. The economy is also held together mostly by the secular Jews and the high-tech industry, many of whom are emigrating and leaving the country for their safety and out of fears that Israeli democracy is dying. The judicial overhaul that got people in the streets months before would also have majorly hurt the economy by making Israel a place unsafe for businesses to operate in. One Israeli economist called it the end of democracy and almost the end of the world. And their economy was hurt from the outside too, through boycotts, divestments, and disruptions to their business.
Israel's only southern port on the Red Sea, the Eilat port, is at a standstill, hit hard by Houthi attacks linked to the Gaza war.
The cost of this war is already running into billions. In Israel, the economy is partially shut down, and Washington is also pouring millions of dollars every day into military operations.
The big story in the end is what people believe. Their economic crisis is something that happens to a lot of countries, but the difference is that in Greece or in Argentina, nobody said, okay, well, this country or this state will not exist anymore. We should think about a different state now. Well, maybe there's going to be a new currency. Maybe there's going to be a new policy. Maybe there's going to be a tough period of time and then some recovery. But when we're talking about what individuals are thinking, if they don't believe in a future, if they see this as the end, then the capitalist logic is such that there is no future. Instead, they take out their money and leave. And this is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
The irony is that the settler colony is built on stories of surviving extermination, from ancient times to Nazi Germany to today's world that they believe is constantly threatening them. Their narrative frames destruction as something that comes from the outside. And yet, the unraveling we see today is largely self-inflicted. They undermine their own institutions, oversee their own corruption, sow discord amongst their own people, and launch genocidal campaigns that murder hundreds of thousands and destroy both their own humanity and their legitimacy in the world. They do all that in the name of remaining on what they claim is their land, while at the same time grabbing their second passport and fleeing the very homeland they claim is essential for their survival. Somewhere beneath the surface, the settlers know the project cannot last forever. And rather than face that reality, the anxiety it produces is channeled into constant war. Because it brings them together, because it's profitable, because it serves the interests of outside powers. But the more they thrash and fight, and the more they fall apart, the closer they bring the colony to its own inevitable collapse. A special thank you to our supporters on Patreon. Doing this work takes time, resources, and editorial independence, so it wouldn't be possible without our supporters online. If you believe in what we're doing and want to be a part of this with us, you can join our Patreon. It's how we keep this going.